Welcome everyone. This is going to be my review of season 1 episode 5 of the X-Files. It is called The Jersey Devil. And this was an episode that was fairly low rated on IMDb compared to the prior ones. So I came in with muted expectations, and I think what's interesting about it is that I was kind of into it for like 15-20 minutes, probably most of the first half. I actually really enjoyed some of the creepy walking around the forest stuff. I got a little kick out of the opening, which is like a period piece. It's like the 1950s, and it's this family whose dad is pulled into the forest. But you've got the classic 50s car. You get the police looking for the body afterwards, and they're all wearing the old school hats and things like that. I was kind of digging the vibes up until a point. That said, though, there is a moment in this episode where it pivots into feeling really silly. And it's not to say that there's not some interesting ideas or thematic points being made. And in particular, this feels like a relatively important stepping stone for the Mulder-Scully relationship for a lot of reasons, mainly due to a subplot that's in this episode. But halfway through the episode, Mulder gets a drawing from a homeless person of what this so-called Jersey Devil is, and it looks like something that I could draw. In fact, it looks like something I could have drawn when I was 5. And I get that this is not meant to be something that an artist has drawn. Like, that's okay, I understand that, but it looks so basic, like something that any kid could draw, that it immediately made me kind of laugh, and it was very hard to take Mulder looking at this drawing seriously. Why he's even looking at it like it means anything. All it really establishes is someone with long hair. That is basically all it shows. But equally, there's a second bad drawing later on when he's back at the headquarters and he's looking through old X-Files stuff, and he looks at an equally plain, simple child's drawing of Bigfoot that is just as lame, but notably, and this what really set me over the edge with sort of like getting to the silly stuff here, is that him looking at this drawing is when he comes to the conclusion that maybe what's being seen isn't a male, it's a female Jersey Devil, and then maybe there's two, maybe there's a pair because they're mates of each other. But he has this this realization, and he's talking on the phone to someone. What if it's a woman? And he says this as he's looking at this drawing of Bigfoot. And the reason why this really made me laugh is because this drawing of Bigfoot is really basic. It's just the outline of the classic Bigfoot, that footage of Bigfoot walking through the forest with the shaky cam. It's just a drawing of that movement with the arms slightly out. But the one bit of detail that's there, because it's basically just the outline with maybe a little bit of a facial feature. But the other detail that's there is that whoever drew this image really wanted to emphasize the chest, so it legitimately looks like Bigfoot with a big old pair of titties. And Mulder looks at this drawing and says, "What if it's a woman?" And I lost it. I lost it. It's just the idea of him looking at this drawing that's just Bigfoot with tits and going, "What if it's a woman? I've cracked the case." And that really made me laugh. So the main story in this one does go into silly territory, and it's not that there's not still moments of good direction and whatnot, but I think part of the problem as well is the direction this episode takes is that the Jersey Devils, this myth that's being created, but what it actually is just like a man beast of sorts that's been had generations living in the Jersey forest. And it's I think multiple times Mulder refers to them as just carnivorous Neanderthals, and that's kind of what it is. They're just cannibals effectively who don't speak, but they have maybe slightly better strength and agility or whatever. But when you eventually see the woman who's the quote-unquote Jersey Devil in this episode, she is literally just a woman with some dirt on her face and long, messy hair. And that's just never not going to just look a bit lame and silly. It's never going to come across as something really otherworldly or something that is actually captivating. It's just someone looking dirty with crazy hair. It's just someone who's a bit feral. And it's just not that surprising or exciting when you eventually see it. And then you add in all the extreme stupidity of these drawings. It just feel really like just like take the tone away from everything. Because earlier on, the flashback at the start, I enjoyed. Mulder speaks to like the park ranger, whoever it is, for the woods, and he's saying, "Hey, yeah, I've seen some crazy things. I saw this guy who was naked once, and it was like he was sniffing the air." Like, if you had just left it to stuff that we'd heard about but not actually seen, and our brains could kind of fill in the gaps, it might have worked. Because, when Mulder says he's going to walk back to town, and there's just a quick scene of him walking through the forest and hearing noises occasionally, that was kind of working. It had a bit of a vibe. It was creepy. But once he's like seeing this woman like run around in the dark and jump up onto a rooftop and whatnot, it just kind of, yeah. So I can't really say I'm all that into this episode as a whole, even though I do think there's some strengths in there. It just, the actual concept just devolves into some stuff that's just a bit too silly to really enjoy. That said, though, there is a lot of other things going on in the episode to give it something to add to the X-Files kind of ongoing lore. And when I say lore, I don't just mean the mythology stuff. I mean the character progression. I mean Mulder and Scully as a pair. Something as simple as they don't fly to Atlantic City to New Jersey because it's close enough to drive, but it's a 3-hour drive, and they mention that because they're literally, Dana leaves Mulder in New Jersey because he doesn't want to leave. He wants to snoop around and look into the case a bit more because it's not really a case yet. They've not been officially assigned to anything, but she wants to go back. She's got her godson's birthday party to go to in the evening, so she has to drive back. So it was just interesting that they could commute back to where they live in this episode, and it kind of became a point of like, Mulder's staying out there, he's going to look into things, he's going to spend the night in an alleyway looking for the Jersey Devil. But this leads to a subplot with Scully, where the first time I've ever really brought up like her romantic life on the show. She's with her friend, obviously the friend's son is her godson, and the friend's like, hey, why don't you want kids? You'd be great with kids. You're trained in the FBI. That's the best training you could probably have for being a mother. And she's like, I don't have the time, and so on and so on. And the friend's like, no, you need to find a man. You need to go do this. And so right away, it was interesting because she even brings up, what about that guy you work with? And Scully's like, nah, he's too obsessed with work. It is interesting to raise that question because we have 2 leads of this show that are a man and a woman, and they are both single. It makes sense that at some point we're going to raise the question of like, can they have a romantic relationship? I'm pleased that right now that's not where it's focusing on, and we're not sort of delving into that yet. Even by the end of this episode, when Scully kind of gives up the prospects of a dating life to help Mulder, it doesn't feel like she's picking Mulder as a romantic partner. She's deciding to focus on that work relationship and like help him, because Mulder is a weird guy who just needs help, because we see him what he's like without the guidance of Scully to sort of keep him in check. In this episode, he gets arrested as a homeless man and gets into a lot of trouble, and at least for right now she's making a commitment to him over a dating life. And it's not just because she feels that loyal to Mulder. I think it's also because she tries to date in this episode. One of the other kids has a single dad, and she goes on a date with him. Mulder early on even jokes, have you got a date? And she's like, no, I've got a birthday party. And the next time she says she has to get back, she's like, no, I actually have a date this time. And it's not necessarily a jealousy thing, but it's kind of like prodding it. She has other priorities potentially, whereas he is obsessed with the work. As Scully said in that one scene, he is all about the work. He's all about discovering the mysteries, and he cares. And she's on this date, and it's going well enough, but she can't really talk about her work, or at least not over dinner, because it's a kind of a gnarly case about cannibalism. It's not what you want to hear about when you're eating. And he's like, he talks about taxation or some shit. But you get the vibe that it's all very pleasant enough, but they're not necessarily, clicking. She's kind of like forcing this relationship to an extent because she's supposed to have one, not because she's really feeling anything strongly for the guy. Where I don't necessarily think she's attracted to Mulder, at least right now, but on some level, helping him like solve these mysteries is more fulfilling to her, and she cares more about doing that and to being a good FBI agent than she does sort of entertaining like some random guy she doesn't really know. Not that her friend's being bad or anything, but it does kind of feel a little bit like peer pressure to like do the dating thing in this episode. So I think at the end, they crack a couple jokes as, Scully gets a call from this guy and she turns him down and decides to go with Mulder to do whatever he's doing at the end. And, there's a couple of fun little jokes here where he says something and she's like, hey, careful, I'll maul you worse than that beast woman, or something like that. And, they have a couple of quick, back and forth moments, and that's all very nice. But it's a definitive choice for her to kind of stick by Mulder's side on some level, and it felt fitting here 5 episodes into a point. It felt like a good moment to do that. And I do think part of it as well is, she is there for the back half of the investigation when they're actually with the park ranger and he's got his trank gun, and she actually takes Mulder to her old professor of anthropology, who Mulder talks to, and actually by the end of the conversation kind of he doesn't convince him of anything, but he's able to make the professor admit that while it's highly unlikely that a sort of top of the food chain version of a human, a Neanderthal with these skills, to evolve in the woods of New Jersey is highly unlikely, he makes him admit that it's not entirely outside the realm of extreme possibility. I love that phrase. Outside the realm of extreme possibility is good. In fact, there's 2 lines that stuck out to me during this scene when he's talking to the professor for the first time. One is that. The other one is when they're talking about the food chain and evolution and how humans basically ensure that no other animal can rise up and be the top of the food chain with how we control things. He says we're destined to like rule this earth until it's done. But he adds on, outside the introduction of an alien entity. And that made me chuckle, because while this episode is not about aliens, typically X-Files at large is about that and Mulder's obsession with aliens. So I thought it was interesting that even though this episode is not about the overall themes of the show necessarily, that little line just kind of thematically made it a little relevant. It's like, oh, but if the aliens are out there, they might be more advanced or stronger or smarter than us. And that could be a big deal. That could be something where, we have to like fight from under. And I don't think that's an accident either. I think that's an intentional little thing they've thrown in there to make your mind bubble a bit. But yeah, they go looking, and Scully, when they're actually like chasing after this Jersey Devil lady, and Scully's like, she always wears like a smart suit, when she's on the cases so far in these episodes. And she doesn't wear high heels, but she wears smart shoes. They're not like athletic shoes. You're not supposed to be running and jumping in these things. But I did like a sort of a double take, because there's a shot where Scully just sort of does an action dive roll. Like she comes in from off camera and like dives into the shot, and she actually like and I thought it was a stunt double for a second, but she actually like lands and positions herself up, and you can see it's her. It's Gillian Anderson who's done this dive roll in this like red suit, and I was like, damn, she put a lot of effort into that. Like, that's a lot of effort for this fairly relatively throwaway goofier episode. Not to say that there's not some good moments of direction. When they're chasing after her, there's some like tropes of the time period. There's something very 80s and 90s to me about the ventilation fan, where it's an otherwise completely dark room, but you've got the sunlight coming through the fan as it's spinning. That's a very 80s 90s thing. I mean, and what's weird is that it works for horror scenes like this one, but it also works for action movie scenes where they're being interrogated. Like, it's just a very atmospheric thing to have, regardless of like what type of tension you're building. But any type of tension is aided with the light coming through a fan that's spinning. So yeah, that was all pleasant enough. The other big theme of this episode is that Mulder's butting head with the local detective or the police commissioner, whoever his rank was, who's running the cases, and he doesn't want Mulder there. FBI doesn't have jurisdiction. They have not like been ordered to like come in and investigate anything. So he's very upfront about, no, leave. I don't want you here. Go away. And then when Mulder's arrested when he's snooping around the back alleyways, and they think he's homeless, he comes and talks to him at the station, and Mulder basically accuses him of being like, kind of like the mayor in Jaws, like, yo, you just want the tourists to keep coming and spending money here in the casinos. You don't want the news of this to get out. You want to take care of it quietly, that kind of thing. But I'd say the bigger element to this is the idea that as we're sort of going through these beats of it, is the idea is it's the kind of the adversity that Mulder faces because no one's going to take him seriously, and part of that's Mulder's own fault. Mulder does kind of jump to just like expecting people to believe the extreme, or at the very least wants to provoke them by offering the extreme theory that he has, even before he's got enough evidence to really back any of it up. And I think it's kind of again another example of like him getting into trouble and why he kind of needs Scully around to toe his line a little bit. But the big thing between them, this is something that I was trying to get to earlier actually, is part of the reason why she probably sees something in Mulder that's worth being there for, even if it's not a romantic thing, but just being there to help take care of him and like assist him and help him do his work better, is that at the end of the episode when they chase down this woman, this cop in the city has got like a SWAT team going after her as well, and they've not got tranq guns. Like I did like a double take when they're going through the buildings looking for her, and then all of a sudden the cop shows up with a SWAT team and they're all running around, and I was like, oh shit, okay, that's escalated quickly. But when they track her down, because she runs from the buildings into the forest, when they go to the forest, the SWAT team kills her, and we get this sort of bittersweet ending where this Jersey Devil lady is just effectively an innocent creature. Yeah, she did have human remains in her stomach, but it's not her fault. That's just, how her kind are raised. But Mulder shows sympathy, he shows compassion and shuts her eyes and asks the cop why he had to kill her, and he's like, well, it's just like putting down any rabid animal. And it's this idea that Mulder looks into all these otherworldly things, and obviously he has a vested reason to find out more about the types of life forms that might have taken his sister. But I think there's an easy kind of a conclusion to come from that stuff, where Mulder might be, not that the episodes I think have shown us this before, but I think there's an easy sort of like conclusion to come from there with just that information, that maybe Mulder is out for revenge, right? That he wants to get to the aliens to make them pay for taking his sister, if not just to get his sister back, if that's possible. And I think this ending of this episode, and it's almost a shame that it's tacked on at the end of a otherwise kind of silly premise of an episode, but the idea that he did sort of like feel sympathetic because this is just a life form and it's not her fault she is the way she is. And I think Scully witnessing that compassion is like, okay, this guy's worth, even though he gets these crazy ideas and some of them are stupid and they're not all going to pan out, he's never malicious about it, and ultimately he saw this woman as an innocent life form who, has to be stopped from hurting people, but that doesn't necessarily mean she has to die either. This can be someone, I don't want to say put in a cage, but, something that's safer, where maybe she could learn, and maybe we could learn from her as to why she exists and why her kind exist. There's definitely like those elements there. And the fact that this cop just killed her just sort of proved the anthropologist's point about how humans are cruel and put people down, and make sure that they can't be overtaken at the top of the food chain. It just kind of emphasizes that point. And then another nice little detail in this scene is that when Mulder is talking to the cop, and he goes up to him and says, why did you have to kill her? And he's getting right in his face, and it's getting tense. Scully steps in, like in between them. You sort of see her coming from the background, and she's literally right between them. And she puts her hand on Mulder's arm she doesn't even say anything. She just, well, maybe she does, but maybe she says, let's go. But either she says that or she implies it with her eyes. But either way, again, it's showing that Mulder might have been about to do something stupid, something that would earn him a reputation, and she's there to toe the line. And it's the idea that she can legitimize what he's doing, and if there's something there to legitimize, it's worth doing then. Right? In effect, if there's any truth, there's that word again, truth. If there's any truth to all these things that Mulder's looking into, and if he's doing it for the right reasons, then it should be backed up if it can be backed up. And she can be there to sort of provide that in some level. So, I'm kind of impressed with how much there was to discuss from this episode. despite the fact that the core Jersey Devil part does get really silly, and it never really recovered from that for me. So there's still a lot here that I think is worth, watching the episode for as part of the. Not that I would ever recommend skipping an episode. If you're going to watch an episode, you watch all, or a TV show, you watch all the bad episodes. You get the full experience, warts and all. I cannot recommend anything else other than that. I'm too much of a completionist at heart. But I do think this episode offers some value character bits for Mulder and Scully as a pair, for what they kind of do for each other, or what specifically Scully does for Mulder, but also the idea that Mulder gives enough of a reason why she should want to be there to help him. And I think those are the parts of the episode that actually do succeed, and I would call it a win in that respects. But it's got a low rating on IMDb, and I don't really disagree with the fact that it's got a low rating, because it does kind of have enough weak things in its main plot that you can't really outright say it's good either. So, but hey, not like, I always say it's not bad, because some of it's kind of bad, but not without merit. That's the phrase. Not without merit. That's what I'll go with. So, not bad. But yeah, we got Scully doing action dive rolls. We got titties on Bigfoot. What more could you want in an episode? I mean, in fact, hell, actually, just another little point here on the themes of the episode. The fact that we introduced talking about Scully's romantic life, and that end up thematically links up with the fact that the twist in the main, horror movie plot is that the monsters aren't just one person. It's a pair. It's a couple. It's a male and a female. And I think that, it's a small thematic link, but I think that's an intentional thing as well. Is that we talk about the bare, raw, animalistic, we need a partner part, and then you have the sophisticated modern people debating if I should get into a relationship, if I should have kids, if I should go down that path. And that's an interesting comparison between things as well. In that, maybe the Jersey Devil is just this raw instinct of this is what we have to do, whereas modern civilized people, if you want to call them that, debate these ideas and maybe choose other things instead. And maybe that's just another indication that Scully's making, quote unquote, an unnatural choice here to help Mulder, but is that morally the right choice, or at the very least to her, is it the right choice for her as a person? And I think that's a neat little thematic touch. And even the idea of like male-female attraction is introduced in kind of a fun, jokey way at the start when she walks in and Mulder looking at a porn magazine, but it's a porn magazine with articles, and apparently whatever topless lady he's looking at claims to be abducted by aliens, and it's never brought up again, so I assume he's disregarded it as a legitimate claim. However, Mulder just judges these things. But again, it brings up some jokes and sets up some of these themes that we're going to be talking about, opposite sexes attracting and finding partnerships. So, yeah. And maybe that's kind of part of the point as well, is that all of the examples that are presented in this episode of traditional romantic partnerships, and then maybe Mulder and Scully are more nuanced because it isn't just a romantic thing, at least not yet. I've got a sneaking suspicion that eventually they're going to tap into that, but I appreciate some restraint in doing any of that early on. So there you go, Jersey Devil, episode 5 of the X-Files in the books. So let's have a look at what's next time then. Episode 6 is called Shadows, and the description on IMDb is as follows. Mulder and Scully investigate the deaths of 2 men believed to have been killed by a powerful psychokinetic force. Ooh, psychokinesis. Oh, actually, people would probably get mad at me if I didn't bring this up. We had an actor cameo here, I think. Wait, did we? No way. Okay, I was convinced we had an actress in this who has been in things that I've seen. She was in 2014's Godzilla, apparently. I thought Rola Ren from Star Trek, The Next Generation, was in this episode. I thought she was the coroner early on. I was convinced of it. I didn't even look it up until this moment. And now that I've clicked on basically, I went to look at the name there just to get the actress's name. and it wasn't the name I was expecting. And I clicked on her there, and turns out it's not her. But you put on the medical hat to hide some of her hair, and all of a sudden, she looks just like Rolla Wren, basically. What, Michelle Forbes, I think her name is. I was just making sure I knew the actress's name. It turned out not to be her. So this entire tacked on bit could have been avoided if I had just not said anything. But hey, I was convinced it was her. But hey, that's the show. Thank you very much for joining. I appreciate it. You can, of course, support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. I'm also working through Person of Interest every week, if that's of interest, funnily enough. Or I've been doing classic Star Trek with Connor. All these things are going on, and there might be another show in the future, but that is what's going on right now. So thank you very much for joining. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?